I'm just good at caring too much. I'm just good at caring too much. Is it too much to ask that you be all mine?
I don't know why it takes me so much time to really greet you, and it's like you coming to my home and I have to greet you and I feel so anxious. I don't know. Anyway, so it's really, I don't get my head around this. So anyway, thanks for watching this again, and I assume if you clicked on this, you really have some interest in this subject. I wanted to talk about how important it is for the girls to have their father in their life and how that can affect a woman's life later on. So, of course, it all starts in childhood. So your father's gone in one way or another. And as a child, you don't understand much. You don't have much choice either. So you end up thinking that maybe there's something wrong with you, or not good enough, or you end up not feeling worthy. And all these thoughts that I think a girl shouldn't have, any child shouldn't have in their life. I think a lot of the unattractive behavior of women nowadays is precisely because of the childhood they've had, or they didn't have, let's say. So I think self-mutilation comes in the form of promiscuity. And that's happening because fathers set the standards in one girl's life. You know, for boys, the fathers are like showing how to be. In a girl's life, the father plays the role as a relationship. First relationship with a man that you have in your life is with your father, and the way he treats you and the way he treats your mother. That's your first experience with how men are, and I believe this has a big impact in a woman's life. Seeing all that is how a girl will model how a woman should be treated and behave. When daddy leaves, he takes a piece of daughter's soul with him, and that lacking, very often, we try to fill it in all sorts of ways. Unfortunately, not the most constructive ways. So, you might come from the scenario of daddy's there but not present. So, as a girl, you're aching to be seen, acknowledged, accepted, approved of. And very often, if we've got his attention, then you don't need to end up with a craving for the external validation. And I believe every time you see a woman too desperate for attention, it's really obvious that she hasn't had the attention from her father when she was a girl. And then you start to fantasize how it would have been if daddy was there, or who daddy was. And all this, you start to create a story. Or there's also the scenario, daddy was there and now he's gone, either through a divorce or he's dead. And that doesn't matter which scenario, that creates a hole in your heart. And when you grow up, you're trying to fill that hole somehow. And that's how you end up in these toxic relationships. And then you start to tell yourself a narrative, the one you like to hear. So you're saying that you're staying with this guy you don't like and you don't want. So your children will have a father. So your children will not feel what you felt when you were a girl. And the problem with that is you focus so much on your children not to have the same experience like you had, that you're kind of making it happen. That's because we always tend to focus on what we don't want to happen rather on focusing what we want to happen. So how do you become a better person? How do you become a better mother? Well, like in any kind of problem, I think you need to start by telling the truth. And the most important thing is telling your truth to yourself. We lie to ourselves more than we lie to anyone else. If you're telling the truth, that means you acknowledge it. You acknowledge that you have a problem, and you know you're not that best mom that you were telling yourself that you are, and you know that you're not that independent, and that you don't need men, and you know that you're not that good partner that you were telling yourself that you were. All these things you were telling yourself only to pamper your ego. You're not all those stuff, and you actually have a problem. And it's a past problem, and just because it's happened in the past, that doesn't mean there's not a problem anymore. If you haven't addressed it, it's never going to go away. Even when you're going to be an old woman, you will still have the problem from when you were 6, for example. So I think we have this tendency to not address problems because they're not present problems. So if it's a past problem, that means it's gone because it's in the past. But that's not the case ever, regardless of your childhood or any other problem that you have never addressed it. So of course it's difficult because saying you have a problem and you're not good, that's not the story you want to tell to yourself. You'd rather tell yourself that you don't need men and the world without men would be a better place. But you're actually saying that you don't need your father but you know that that's not the truth. So once again, acknowledge it, that the narrative you were telling to yourself, it's not the truth. You could say actually what you mean, and that is that you wish that your father would be in your life because you love him and you want to establish a connection with him. And you admit that behind all that criticism for men, you actually feel worthless sometimes. And the way you cover your worthiness is with overcompensating, when actually the truth is that there's a part in you that's broken and it needs addressing. Try and find out how you feel and how you hide those feelings and what do you do to overcompensate for those feelings. Like I said, you need to have the courage to admit that all that bad behavior you don't want to talk about or you don't even want to think about, it's not because the lack of your father. Because the one that needed your father was your little girl, but she's not the one that did all those mistakes. Stop blaming men for the mistakes you've done in your past. And first of all, actually, admit that you've done mistakes that you don't want to talk about. Quit the idea of, I have no regrets just because it sounds good. You know full well you have regrets, and big ones, and that you don't want to think about those. You don't want to think about what you've done. And that's okay, but you need to do it in order to take responsibility for your own choices and realize that the lack of a father in your life doesn't mean that all men are shit or that you can't find a good partner, because all men are the same. And whatever story you've told yourself until now, you do need men. You're not independent. We are not independent creatures. That's why we are two kinds of on this planet. If we could have done without each other, we wouldn't be together on this planet. You need to understand that the negative side of your life has happened because of your reaction to the fact that your father wasn't around you, not because your father wasn't around you. And you reacted to these circumstances acting in an ugly way that now you don't want to think about it, or even worse, you don't even want to admit that that's happened in your life. And also, don't forget to forgive yourself. It's okay. We are imperfect and we live in an imperfect world and we are flawed. And that's okay. You're not the only one that's done that. That's not the problem. The problem starts when you don't want to admit to yourself all the things we spoke about. Also, you need to remember that you're not a child anymore. You're a grown-up, and now you can set boundaries for yourself. You can decide whether to want to talk to your father or even to establish a new connection with him. Ask yourself, are you trying to build a relationship with your father, or are you trying to recapture a relationship with your daddy? Which, that you don't need that. Your girl needed that a long time ago, and that didn't happen. So it's pointless right now, and it's not going to happen. And you also don't have to forget that your father is broken in some way that perhaps you haven't acknowledged. Or by being too busy with your own pain, you've never considered the fact why your father has behaved like that in your life. There you go, girls. I hope truly that I made myself understood and I provided any kind of value in your heart and in your life. And it would be nice to think that even though it's too early for my channel to be seen and for my message to be reached, I truly believe that it's going to reach the right hearts in time. So I would like to think I made a little bit of change in the mentality of women nowadays and feminism and all this, that it's not really a woman's thing, it's an ego's problem, and it happens to be in women nowadays. And you know, back then in the 60s it was a man's ego's problem. So there you go. So if it's not them, it's us, and if it's not us, it's them. I believe it's everyone, regardless of the situation. You need to look at yourself and how you truly are, and I think only then we're gonna have meaningful and strong connections with each other.
I'm just good at caring too much. I'm just good at caring too much.